This presentation discusses participatory vendor selection. I personally felt this was one of the best lessons and something that truly has real-world application for work that I would be doing. Participatory vendor selection is very important for choosing an information systems vendor. And not just an information systems vendor, but I think whenever a major investment is about to be made in software or some new system, it's a structured process that gathers information from many individual stakeholders. Having individual meetings prior to the group meeting gives the analyst the opportunity to collect information and create a relationship with the stakeholder, which is very important, and lets the stakeholder know that his opinions are being considered in the decision-making process. Involving many and using a system to quantify opinions limits the impact of individual biases, and it helps arrive at the best selection for the overall organization. Open communication dialogue lead to consensus building and help create a feeling of ownership about the decision. I'm going to continue talking about the slide for a moment because I do think this is very important. The steps, the first one is that stakeholders are invited to participate. We do the one-on-one interviews that has a number of reasons, developing a relationship, finding out what's important for people, knowing what they might be thinking as they come into the group meeting. The group meeting is conducted, which will lay down the ground rules and construct the group's scoring, discussing any major differences that exist between all. All of that information will be put across vendor characteristics so that vendor performance can be assessed. And finally, and very, very important, documentation will be done by the analyst all along the way and especially at the end, so that everyone's input is there and that it is well documented what was important to people and how this decision was arrived at. To give a very brief example, in the real world we would have many people, as we said, involved in a decision like this, and some of those people would include the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Medical Information Officer, the Chief Nursing Officer, clinicians, a HIPAA committee, quality assurance, a representative from finance. If you're in a government agency, you may even have legislative people around, because sometimes you can't make decisions like this without legislation to support it. In Department of Defense, you might have Force Health Protection people. Basically, in your organization, it would be a wide selection of people, anyone who is integral to implementing, using, and deciding about this system. The brief example again, we're only going to give an example using two people just to keep this brief. But Mr. Smith, we talked to him about what's important to him, what attributes, how we would weight things, and we're going to kind of weight things on a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being the least important and 7 being very important. And what we see with expert number 1, Mr. Smith, is that compatibility to ALTA he rates very highly. That's very important to him. Automated clinical decision making, not quite as high. And a dimmer's eye, the personnel system that feeds the clinicians, FTEs, and all the information about them. How important is that this be part and parcel of these systems that are in consideration? With expert number 2, Ms. Jones, we see her rating things a little bit differently. On a scale of 1 to 10, again, she gives a 0.8 for compatibility with ALTA. She might weight things a little bit differently on automated clinical decision processes, and whether or not she can get at the personnel information has a little bit different weight. We come up with a consensus model once we have talked about what is truly important and weighted that out. Once we've decided what the attributes are going to be and how important that they are for each person who is part of the decision-making group, we do a consensus model and we put up on the wall uh, what's under consideration and how that was weighted uh, in a consensus way by everyone, averaging that out. And we see in this particular situation that looking at a system from SAT Consulting and a solution from Ingenix, uh, what existed as far as the attributes of Alta, automated clinical decision processes, and ability for personnel information. So then we go through our equation here on whether or not these things are important, and we see that SAT Consulting compared to Ingenix comes up with a 0.75 versus a 0.3. So we've demonstrated how we quantify this and how everyone was weighted, everyone's importance to each attribute was weighted and part of this equation. The takeaway on this is that this process is structured. It asks for input from key individuals, which is very important, and makes them know that they are part of this decision-making process, and in that way gets buy-in from them. It limits the impact of individual bias because everything is transparent, because the attributes are identified and agreed upon and weighted by the group as a whole, and no one attribute or no one person's bias or leaning one way or the other has too much impact. It furthers communication. It furthers ownership in the system, again, by giving everyone input and a dog in the fight. And finally, and most importantly, it provides a method for coming up with some sort of consensus on what is most important for everyone, and a decision model to make a decision by. So that is the end of this, and we'll see you again next